it's me, Crystal, and I just woke up today and decided I was gonna wear my glasses. And normally I don't make that decision because I really like my contacts. I'm like super into that, but these are really cute and I like to wear them, so I decided to wear them today. It's just funny because between my glasses and the scrunchie is kind of giving me 1997. It's making me laugh. But anyway, I wanted to talk about something today. So last year I made this video about how to recover from severe writing burnout. And so I decided today I wanted to make a sister video about how to recover like lost motivation, or like how to find motivation when you feel like there's a lack of motivation in certain areas of your life. And so I feel like this can apply to like things outside of writing, but I like talking about writing over here, so that's what I'm going to focus on. And so before I get started, just like a quick, like what the actual problem is, and then like what the solution was, and like what helped me like find some motivation and like get back to writing and like feeling balanced again. So at first I thought I was burned out because I did burn myself out a little bit when I was writing the last book that I finished last year. But I took my own advice and I went through those steps and I felt better and I was like really excited about writing, and I opened up my document and I start writing and I just feel like I'm walking through sludge a little bit, and it just feels like hard to write. And so I was like, that's okay. Maybe I'm just like not ready to write this story, and I'll work on something else. And I go to work on the other story, but I can't focus on it, and I'm still thinking about the other story. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. I'll just go back to the first story. So I go back to the first story, and I just feel like frozen. And I could get the story to move if I like shoved really hard on it, but I don't like to write that way. It always makes me feel like there's something wrong. And then I start overthinking everything and I get stuck in, chasing my tail in my head. So, I went, around in circles for a few weeks. And I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I need some help. So step number one, and I did not do this step on purpose. It just kind of, the opportunity presented itself. And so I took the opportunity. And so the first step is to talk to somebody who understands like what you're going through. And so one of my writing friends, like after things had calmed down for her after the holidays, she sends me a message and she's like, how's writing and querying going? And I answer honestly, and I'm just like bad, and I don't give any details at first, but because, she also spent a lot of time last year writing and querying, she kind of understands, that even when, you get requests when you're querying, not only can that sometimes extend the total amount of time that you're in the trenches, because different agents have different response times, and some of them can get back to you in a couple weeks, and some of them will take months, depending on, their workload and their schedules and whatnot. And all of this is a recipe for crazy making. And also all of this is a recipe for like your motivation going all the way down the drain. And sometimes just a reminder that you're not alone in like what you're going through and how you're feeling is enough to help you feel better. And she also like encouraged me to like journal out, what specifically about my writing am I feeling down about. It could be everything, but in my case, it wasn't everything. It was just a couple of things. And so then, but the benefit of it is that it got me out of my head, because I had just been running around in circles in there for like I said, about 3 weeks, and it was driving me crazy. And so it got me out of my head. And once I was out of my head, I was like, okay, I can breathe again. So what next? So that brings me to step number 2, which is to find some outside inspiration. And this can be like a seminar you went 2 years ago. It could be a book. It could be a movie. It can be a pep talk from a family member. So this particular day, I work with my sister, but my sister had left early that day. And so I go to my uncle, and I also work with one of my uncles, and he's always listening to like these like motivational speeches and reading like these, motivational like nonfiction books. And so I go up to him and I'm like, I need a pep talk. And specifically, I was like, I feel like bad about my whole life and I can't write. It's basically along the lines of what I said. And so I wrote down some of the things he said because it was actually really helpful. And not that I'm surprised that he had something helpful to say, but you know, if he was like a family trope, he would be like the fun uncle who like doesn't really take things very seriously. And so, you know, I was hoping he would have, you know, some information that he could pass along, but I wasn't expecting it to be as helpful as it was. And just basically a couple of the main things that he said to me was that sometimes, you know, we have like a lot of things that we want to accomplish, and it just kind of like splits our focus. And so he says like, and also we start stressing ourselves out, you know, and so he was like, I don't need to worry about all this other stuff. I just need to pick like one thing that I want to accomplish and like focus on that. And then like, don't worry about anything else. And then he was also talking about how like, you know, I needed something fun to do and like a fun goal or just something fun to do in general, because when you're having fun in one area of your life, you know, it spills over into other areas of your life, and it will spill over into my writing, which actually brings me to my third step, but I'll get to that in a second. And so specifically, my source of inspiration came from 3 places. It came from this pep talk. It came from this book that I was reading, this short book that I was reading, and it came from this keynote speech from a writing conference I went to like 10 years ago in like fall 2013. And so the book I was reading was The Momentum Theorem by Dave Ramsey, and specifically it was this section on focus. And so I'm going to tell you the story so we're all on the same page. And so Dave is a finance guy, Dave Ramsey, and he was giving a talk to like some new football players, like a finance talk. And then afterwards he went up to this more veteran football player who was like a really great wide receiver, and he just like couldn't help himself. He's like, you're like a great wide receiver, why do you sometimes drop an easy catch in the end zone? And the football player understood, you know, what he was asking. And he's like, it's basically for one of 2 reasons: fear, or living in the past, or greed, or living in the future. And he's like, basically what's happening is sometimes like you have a ball, you know, coming at your face, and you should be able to catch it, but there's also like this big football player from the opposing team like barreling down on you, and you're going to get hit whether you catch the ball or not. And he's like, when you've been doing this for a while, you know exactly, you know, how bad that's going to hurt and how long it's going to take you to recover from it. It's going to be like at least 3 days in the ice bath, you know, and sometimes you freeze from the fear and you lose focus and you drop the ball. And the other reason he was saying is that like maybe you have an easy catch coming your way and there's nobody close enough to you to stop you, and you just know you're going to catch the ball and score a touchdown. But instead of staying focused on catching the ball and complete the touchdown, you start thinking about, you know, the dance you want to do in the end zone and the interview questions that you want to answer after the game, and you lose focus and you drop the ball. And I found that like just the timing of reading that, you know, and also just like picking up that book in the first place, it's about 40 something pages. And so I was like, I'll read it at the top of the year since it's about, you know, like creating momentum. And I picked it up when I was at the top of feeling like this lack of motivation, and I thought it would help, and it was really helpful. But that section specifically, the timing was like really good, because I'm like, I did have a lack of focus, and I was feeling like that lack of focus. And I'm like, it makes sense. And so on one hand, I'm scared because I'm thinking about like all like the psychological suffering that you can go through when you're writing the book and when you send it out and stuff. And then on the other hand, I'm thinking about like future psychological distress. So I'm still carrying around past psychological distress, and I'm worried about future psychological distress. But also sometimes when I'm writing, instead of focusing on writing the book, I'm thinking about, you know, who I'm going to query and how many queries I'm going to send out. And I'm writing, you know, my query letter, like at the very like when I'm in chapter 1 still, you know, because I want to be prepared, you know, and I'm thinking about querying it and getting good responses. And I'm thinking about how I'm going to handle negative responses. And I'm not focused on writing the book. I'm thinking about all these other things. So I thought that was really helpful. I thought it was really interesting, you know, information. And even though he was talking about football and I'm not a sports person, it was just one of those like examples that just like translates really well, you know? And then the third thing that was really inspirational is I was cleaning the kitchen one night, and I have like this 2nd generation Clickwheel iPod that I have on a speaker in my kitchen. And so I will just sometimes just like shuffle all of the music while I'm cleaning if I'm not like in the mood for something specific. And so this keynote, because it's in my iTunes, this recording that I made of a keynote address from a writing conference. And it was, I don't know the author's last name, and he writes like, I guess like literary fiction, and he had recently written a memoir, and he was talking about like accepting failure as like part of the writing process, and like kind of like what he went through when he felt like he had fallen into a ditch and he had gotten into a rut, and how he kind of got out of that and, you know, found his motivation and his drive to continue writing, even, you know, with failure, like breathing down on him, and just kind of how he learned to accept that this is just part of the process and you fail all the time. You know, if you're writing a short story and your word count's too long, you know, or too short or whatever. I was going to skip it when the speech came up, but it was only about 25 minutes. And I was like, you know what, just listen to it. And I needed to hear it. And he had some really good advice. And one of the things he said was like he was working on this book and he couldn't get it to work. And so finally he was like, I'm just going to do something fun. Like, I just need to do something. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, I'll work on something else. You know, it's just part of the process. And I was like, that's a really healthy mindset to have. And so he went into this folder where he has like older ideas, like ideas that like weren't working at the time that he had them, or he didn't have the skill set to write the story at the time that he got the idea. And there was this one idea in particular that he kind of latched onto, and he pulled it out, and he was just kind of like, you know, looking at it from like a different angle now that some time has passed. And then he wrote the story in a different way than he was originally writing it. And then it, you know, everything turned out well. And now he has a plan for the next time he falls into a ditch, you know? And so I was like, that's a really good idea. I just need what's going to be fun to write, you know? Which brings me to my third step. So in the midst of getting the pep talk and talking to my writing friend and, you know, cleaning the kitchen and reading Dave's book and listening to that keynote, I was taking my uncle's advice and enjoying my life. I was watching Drop Dead Diva, and I did some singing, and I was playing some video games, and I was relaxing. So the third step is to relax and have some fun. Enjoy your life. And there really isn't anything else to say here, because it's pretty self-explanatory. So we're going to go to step number 4, which is to try again, which is to write again, or do whatever the thing is again. So in my case, the solution was to write again, but not just write again, just do something a little different. And so I decided that since my other ideas were stressing me out, and since I couldn't focus on them, and also just because of the way I think in general, I'm like, maybe something is wrong. And this, I think, like maybe a relevant side note, in addition to like being kind of stuck and not having any motivation and not being able to focus, I think the problem is that both of the ideas that I was trying to write, neither one of them are like exactly what I was in the mood to write. And because I can write whatever I want, I decided that I should do that. I should write whatever it is that I want. And so I kind of came to this conclusion as I was writing everything down that I think part of what was going on was probably that, you know, sometimes it doesn't matter, you know, what I work on, as long as it's like kind of up my alley and I'm interested in the idea. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be up my alley. I just need to be interested in the idea, and like, that's it, and I can write it. But every once in a while, I get in these moods where I very specifically want something very specific, and I have a hard time, you know, concentrating or enjoying writing until I write like that thing that I want. This very specific, like, feeling and vibe that I want. And I think I've talked about this before. one time I was talking to the same writing friend, and she was like, some writers write because they, you know, have a topic they want to explore, and some writers, you know, write because they are like really into romance and they really like getting couples together, and some people write because they want to just soak in a certain feeling, and that's the kind of writer that I am. And most of the time that feeling is just kind of like some kind of crazy, you know, dark fiction, and I'm happy. But sometimes I have a very specific taste for something, and I think that's kind of what was going on this time. There's just a very specific kind of energy I want right now. But anyway, back to step 4 is write again, but do something like a little different. Because sometimes, you know, when you are stuck in a rut, you know, it helps if you do something different, if you look at the story in a different way. And so I was thinking about like a new idea that I'd recently gotten, and I was like, that would be fun and that would be different, and why don't I do that? But then my brain was like, oh, do you remember like this old idea that I have on like a Word document on my computer? It's like, do you remember that idea? And I was like, I do remember that idea. And so I was kind of like, why don't I write that idea? And that would also be really fun. But instead of like just like going into that Word document and finding that idea, I kind of took my memory of it, and I'm glad I did this. And so I wasn't influenced by whatever nonsense I wrote down however many years ago that was. Instead, I took the idea as I remembered it, and I was like, how can I like do something a little different here? And once I latched on to it, I was like really, really excited, and then started writing again. And then in true me fashion, I analyzed how I got to this point and wrote it all down so that I have a plan for the next time this happens again. We hope it won't happen again, but if it does, we have a plan. And so to recap, the 4 steps are to talk to somebody who understands what you're going through. The second step is to seek outside inspiration, whether that is, you know, like I said, a movie or a book or seminar, whatever, pep talk. The third step is to relax and have some fun, because that will spill over into other areas of your life, including the area that you are wanting motivation in. And the fourth and the last step is to write again, if we're talking about writing, but do something just a little different, because it will help like propel you forward. It will fill you with energy. And sometimes just doing something new and like different, it's like really energizing. So that's going to be all for this video. Hopefully it was helpful in some way, and I hope you're having a good month so far and a good year so far. And if you're not, you still have plenty of time to turn things around. I think I've read something like a week or 2 ago about how most people give up on their like goals like in the middle of January or something. And I'm like, we don't have to do that. You know, we don't have to give up immediately. We also don't have to make yearly goals either. And, you know, if you know, you know, but I'm like a big fan of like quarterly goals and monthly breakdowns of those quarterly goals, so that, you know, you're constantly cycling through like things that you want to accomplish, things that you're excited about. Or, you know, you could just be perfect, like a handful of people, and you don't ever have any goals because your life is just exactly, always exactly what you want. You could be that annoying person. But for the rest of us, we have our goals, and they're fun, and they make us feel good. So yeah, so that's all for this video, and I will see you guys later. And at some point, I have a writing update. Not yet, it's still too early. But it always feels good, you know, to have a writing project to work on. Also, I'm gonna go to a writing conference or 2 this year. Maybe 3 if I'm just feeling crazy. But I want to go to at least 1. And I might go to 2 though. We'll see. So that is all for today. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye.